coming up.
Is NDDN government procurement frustrating?
In an event that Canada were to be engaged in hostilities with a foreign actor, how can your product or service be of use to defend Canada and assist our armed forces to successfully perform their mission in combat?
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
We have with us two witnesses for our second hour. Mr. Gar Golozli from Galaxia Mission Systems, Chief Executive Officer, and from Global Spatial Technology Solutions, Inc., all the way from Boston. Mr. Kolatz, thank you, both of you, for joining us. Stuart, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses that are here today. Is NDDN government procurement frustrating? Don't everyone laugh at once.
It's not as much as it's frustrating. Again, I'm talking from a company size of Galaxia, and we established about 5 years ago. It's just the method of procurements that are fairly outdated. So when we're looking at the similar type of procurement process down in the United States, they've got a very specific process in place to deal with new space companies that are outside of the norm of your procurement processes. So in that sense, I think we do need to modernize those processes to make sure we can respond to projects that are not necessarily taking 2 years to just go through in contracting phase. So an end-to-end project of 3 years from awarding until, for example, deploying into space could be faster.
Do you think that's something that's specific to software or space assets, or I'm just thinking about, in your industry, the replacement cycle, the evolution of the products must be so fast. Then we heard this on another committee earlier, that by the time you get something out the door, it may be redundant or it needs to be upgraded, et cetera, et cetera. Is that kind of, for you as a business, it kind of runs down into wasted time and energy if things can be speeded up from a 2-year process to a 1.5 years, say, even by that much?
I mean, again, just talking from a company our size, time is of essence for us. So, like, it's very difficult for a company, a new space company, to just last about a year and have to go through a contracting phase for you to kind of keep your talents, your skills in place.
What kind of intelligence is it that you gather with your, I know you said your software nano satellites?
So we do manufacture the spacecrafts with software capabilities. Our spacecrafts are capable of autonomously scanning for any sort of anomalies. As I mentioned, we do have some applications in critical infrastructure, gas line monitorings and things like that. However, in defense, we have many in maritime, land-based, and air-based systems.
So specifically in a military application, can you give us an example?
For instance, we can look for over a vast area of land and look for any sort of construction that is happening over a continent.
Do you contract your services out to foreign nations?
Not now. Not
okay.
Yet.
Next question: What actually classifies as a nano satellite? What kind of size of vehicle are we talking about?
It's the standard of spacecrafts that are usually under 25 kilograms. It can go anywhere from 1 kilo to 25 kilo. It's just merely the size and weight of them classifies them as nanosats.
Do they launch on missions with other with other payload?
Usually, yes. Because of their size, they usually are launched as a secondary payload on, let's say, Falcon 9 mission. And it's called a ride-share mission, so they go up as a ride-share mission.
Being launched from the United States at the moment, or
there are several launch vehicles that do that. A lot of our launches happens through SpaceX. We talked earlier about having to have guardrails on our applications, like how we're thinking about military civilian applications for space assets. And I wanted to ask you this: if our adversaries like Russia and China have no guardrails, not the way we would have guardrails, would you think it would make sense for us to restrict our applications to put us at a disadvantage versus our adversaries? That's a tough question. I mean, we also see that with their launch vehicle capabilities as well. The type of fuel that are being used, the type of reorbiting methods and protocols that are used. For example, for China, I would say there is less oversight on that, so it really hinders the progress once you have these kind of guardrails in place. It does slow down the progress.
Do they have similar assets in space as what your company's producing?
I'm not aware of anything specific.
Okay, so your company's producing something truly unique?
No, I'm just not personally aware of that system existing.
Okay. Do you think that in space, the biggest risk that we have right now is space to ground, ground to space, or space to space, in terms of the risks that we have to our military or civilian spacecrafts?
On an offensive side, or on just kind of a passive risk?
Well, on offensive side.
On offensive side, I would say probably ground to space, space to space are the largest.
Thank you, Mr. Pawlowski, 5 minutes, please.
I'm new to this committee, but it seems to me when we're talking about defense, and particularly with Arctic sovereignty, any way you slice it and dice it, it would seem that to protect the Arctic, given the vast size of our northern regions, that any sort of attempt to monitor our borders is going to involve a lot of use of satellites. From everything from monitoring to the weather to the communications, everything seems to go through satellite. Mr. Kolaz, I believe, talked about cybersecurity, and in talking about what's seemingly anti-satellite weaponry, which I gather some countries are developing, that we or you do not have and haven't. Or have you been contemplating what, if anything, you can do in terms of protection from anti-satellite weapons? Because it would seem to me that our defense is very wrapped up in our satellite communications. What, if anything, can we do to ensure that we're not totally dependent on satellites, and the possibility that some other country, by taking out our satellites, could severely undermine all of our defenses, particularly in the north?
Would you like me to comment on that, or just?
Either or both of you. Go ahead, Arid, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think the risk of space assets being attacked cannot be negated. But one of the ways that we can kind of get ahead of that is launch responsive systems. So these are the systems, the type of satellites that are ready to be launched, and that is an ecosystem around it. So it's not just the spacecraft itself, it's the launch vehicle that is ready to be launched, it's the launch operation and CONOPS. So these are satellites can be up in orbit under a month or two at times, or even less than that. So I think one way that we can get ahead of that is have these launch responsive capabilities in place, so in case something happens, we have the mechanisms to be able to re-enter more spacecrafts and add more assets to that. So that's one thing I would add. I'll pass it back to Richard.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that is a correct statement, but what is the probability of somebody physically taking out a satellite? It is much less than somebody taking over a satellite electronically or disrupting the flow of information. We currently monitor the Arctic every minute by taking a look at images and signals from a vast array of satellites. The ability to remove all of those commercial satellites, which provides now probably over 80% of the surveillance and communications capability, is a huge challenge. Taking out certain satellites that provide strategic capability is a different thing. So it really is, what is the likelihood of an event occurring, and what is the impact of that event? So again, the activity that is going on today, which we witness across various nations, is that somebody is disrupting the flow of information. So not a hostile act of war, but enough to disrupt the economy. And economic defense is national defense. So it's a question of how does one manage that capability.
So I take it from what you're saying, there might be certain value in numbers in terms of satellites, that we've got enough satellites up there that taking out one or two or a handful of satellites wouldn't make us vulnerable, that there are enough other alternatives. Is that part of what our defense is?
It depends on what those satellites are doing. Certain satellites are very specific, detecting nuclear launches, issuing nuclear launch codes, not for us, but for our allies. Those are very, very specific. But if you take one of those out, we're in a totally different world. The loss of communications, navigation satellites, surveillance satellites that are up there right now, the numbers of them provides a redundant or a certain amount of capability in itself. Having a coalition, a vast amount of capability, is a defense mechanism in itself as opposed to having one asset.
Is that what modern intelligence networks try to do, is to ascertain which satellites are doing what? So if they want to take out a satellite, they would know that? Is that something that espionage, counter-espionage nowadays does?
Yeah, well, I can't comment on what they do nowadays, but what I can say is that information can come from a vast amount of sources. Some satellites can specifically look for very specific signals, and those would be a high-value target. That is correct.
Ms. Gallant.
Posed to both of our witnesses.
You have 4 minutes.
To both of our witnesses, does your technology have an automatic mechanism to report anomalies and uninterrupted, and that are potential threats to NORAD? So if your technology detects an anomaly, maritime anomaly, for example, is there an automatic mechanism to send that directly to NORAD so it appears on their screen?
So from our capability at the moment, we are providing information. D&D is using our system right now. They are not, I do not believe, forwarding it on to NORAD, but it could very easily be done, basically just by giving them a password and logging into the system, detecting threats unclassified based on the pattern of life analytics of a vessel, for example, entering the Canadian EEZ.
Log in, NORAD would have to log in. There's no way for them not to have to just go surfing for one of these anomalies. You can't just...
No, this system is operating today. In fact, when the war with Ukraine started, and I listened to the Minister of National Defense said, we'd like to know where all of the Russian vessels are and what they're doing, and how many years it'll take us to do that. I directed my team to start providing that information immediately, free of charge, which we've been doing for the last 3 years, to the Government of Canada, saying we have that information right now, and here are the vessels, and here are the threats. So that technology is available right now.
Able to detect these shadow vessels that are transporting Russian oil to buyers?
Yes, you can.
In an event that Canada were to be engaged in hostilities with a foreign actor, how can your product or service be of use to defend Canada and assist our armed forces to successfully perform their mission in combat, besides what you've already mentioned?
Yeah, well, the primary one is being able to detect vessels that are a risk or a threat. So whether those are vessels running an embargo, ships are using it today when they go to an operating area to identify a vessel that may be smuggling drugs, weapons, or people. So that pattern of life analytics that we are doing with our system today, using unclassified space assets, is in operation today. In fact, we've been deployed on Canadian warships operating in international operational capabilities, as well as to organizations ashore.
Being impacted by a cyber attack?
Sorry, have we been?
Yes. Have you been impacted by it?
To date, we have not.
Okay. And these questions also apply to your company. Do you have a means of signaling automatically to NORAD or the Canadian Defense any anomalies that you detect?
Yeah, the way that we are designing our spacecrafts and all the environment around it is very software driven in a sense. So that means we can take any sort of information and we can relay that into C3 command software. So it could be posted into that or any other platforms that our clients would use. So it is portable for sure.
if it were a notification, would it help to be automatic? Would it not?
Yeah, it is
useful?
automatic. I'm just saying it's like the destination is just up to the client where it needs to go. So it can be implemented to that automatic can be text message to your phone if you want to.
Okay, so the defense organizations would have to subscribe to that service in Iran. Do they?
Currently?
Yes.
No.
Even the Canadian defense organization?
Yeah.
CAF doesn't utilize your capabilities?
Not right now. Yeah.